Okay. Hello, everyone, and happy Friday Eve. Welcome back to another episode of Creator Tea Talk. My name is Jayde Powell, and I'm your hostess, coming at you live from Atlanta, Georgia, where it is unfortunately 50 degrees. Fortunately, however, I do have a fictional cup of piping hot tea that comes in the form of today's episode, which is the tea on building creator brands. And I'm very excited about the panelists that we have today. But before I have them introduce themselves, I wanted to share a little tidbit about what Creator Tea Talk is for the people that are new here. So I launched Creator Tea Talk last year as a space for creators, influencers, and the marketers behind some of our favorite brands to discuss openly the topics that are most relevant to us. We've had some discussions on pay transparency, others on mental health, others on how to be a UGC content creator. And today we're going to dive into how creators can build brands of their own. And with that said, I do want to pass it over to my panelists now to introduce themselves. And I would love to start with who I love to call in my head La Bianca, aka Bianca K. Spencer.
I love that intro. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. Like Jane mentioned, my name is Bianca. You probably see me around the internet as Bianca Catherine. I am the founder and owner of Yo Soy Afro Latina. It's a lifestyle brand that highlights and celebrates the beauty, experiences, and cultures of Afro Latinas. And I'm also the senior social media manager over at VH1 and BET. And I'm super excited to be here and be in conversation with everybody. So I will toss it over. Let me toss it to Dante.
All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Dante. I am a social media manager and strategist by day, but I'm also the founder of Yams the Playlist, which is a social media community and brand for lovers of R&B music. So if you love R&B music, give us a follow. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I think this is my third Creator Tea Talk, Jade.
It
So
is. You're a vet.
I'm back as a veteran. And I'll pass it over to Rosie.
Thanks, Dante. I feel like I'm going to be the only one with the non-American accent, so I'm so sorry. I am a personal branding expert here on LinkedIn and a content creator on TikTok and Instagram. But my day job, I am a social media strategist at DDB Melbourne, working on Coles, which is one of Australia's biggest supermarkets. And then because that's not enough, I'm also one of the co-founders of It's a Definite Maybe podcast, which I run with one of my friends from university. And I will pass it over to Wei.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Sai, and I'm the founder of Very Asian. Very Asian is a new media company all about helping increase Asian American representation in media and entertainment, and also just sharing all kinds of Asian stories, news, and supporting small businesses. It's known on Instagram as @veryasian.co, which is also the website, veryasian.co. And I will pass it on over to Marilyn.
Hey everyone, so excited to be here. My name is Merlin Oliver. I'm from Brooklyn, Flatbush specifically. I am the co-founder of the Brooklyn Mavens. It's a platform and community that celebrates the culture of Brooklyn. We highlight small businesses and their stories, and we share why our borough is the best through the lens of true Brooklynites. I'm also the content and social strategist for the employer brand team at Etsy. And I'm going to pass it to Katerina.
Hi, I'm Katerina. You're welcome to call me Kate. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually the chief creative officer of a media production firm out of Dallas, Texas called Louder Group. And I also founded a brand called Off the Record, which aims to accelerate human connection by helping people transition from small talk to deep conversation with a card game. Both roles and businesses I essentially got into from being a creator on TikTok. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel with everybody else.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. I'm so excited to have all of you on here because I know you guys have a lot of experience building brands of your own, which is perfect for today's conversation. So I don't want to delay, and I do want to get into the first question. And anyone can answer this. Feel free to raise your hand first. How did you decide that you wanted to start a brand, one? And was there like a specific aha moment that kind of made you realize that you wanted to turn whatever your idea was or whatever your project was into something bigger?
I mean, I can kick this one off. I vividly remember I started in a job about 3 years ago at a small social media agency, and I was sitting at my desk one day and I thought, you know what? I want to do something that's my own, but I wasn't quite ready to start a company. So I texted my best friend and I was like, hey, I have a wild idea, but do you want to start a podcast? She was like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. You should totally do it. I was like, no, no, us, you and me together, start a podcast. She was like, sure, yeah, hilarious. And then I was like, no, 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 I'm not kidding. I want to be able to have a voice. I want to have a deep and meaningful conversations. I want to actually do something that we build from scratch and we have as our own, that is no one else's. We get to have autonomy over, we get ownership over, and we get to build something we're proud of. And 3 years later, we're like 100 episodes in, and she realized I wasn't kidding. And it was just a very fun aha moment and realizing, you know what, we can do this. You don't have to be building a multi-million-dollar business from your garage like they did with Amazon, and it can be a fun little podcast. And it has been so fun to do. And that was my big aha moment when I realized that I really wanted to do something more and create something that I could say I did from scratch.
I have a similar kind of story to Rosie. So I also had hit up my best friend to start Brooklyn Mavens. A lot of people don't know that we actually started as BK Fashion Mavens because when I started in social media, I was paying influencers like 3K to do a YouTube back in like 2017. And I was like, yeah, I need to be part of this. So we started BK Fashion Mavens as like fashionistas in Brooklyn. But then like a year later, we got tired of talking about it, but also noticed that there was no one talking about what was happening in Brooklyn, meaning all of the changes, the culture, beyond the fashion. And then we rebranded to Brooklyn Mavens. So we had two aha moments. And today we have over like almost 60K followers. So yeah, that's my story.
Period. Fuck your shit. I love that.
Yeah, I would say for me, I feel like it might be pretty similar for everybody, but I've been working in social media for about almost 10 years now. And so I've always had this, kind of idea in my head of like, what can I build on my own since I know how to do it? Yeah, I've been doing it for everyone else. How can I do it for myself? Um, and so I've always been really, really into music. My friends look to me to, put them on the new music and whatnot. So I had this idea to kind of create my own, Instagram page based on one of my playlists. So I called it Yams the playlist. That's the full name. And yeah, I've been working with Spotify for the past year, and before that, I worked at an entertainment publication. So I kind of had the know-how to, understand how to run that page, but I wanted to do it my own way, so I did. And in the first year, I grew it to over 250,000 followers. So that kind of worked out. But yeah, there wasn't really a true aha moment for me, but just the idea that I know I can do this, so like let me do it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience as Dante and Merlin. I started Very Asian during the pandemic, and it was sort of at the beginning of the surge in anti-Asian hate. And what I had noticed was that no one was really talking about it, even among the Asian American community. And I was like, you know what? Instead of complaining, I'll just start posting on Instagram. I know how to use Instagram. I run my own social media agency. That's my day job. So I know how to do this. So it's something I'm passionate about. I can just talk about this, even if it's, just talking to a few followers. Hopefully it reaches someone. So that's really how I started it. It was really just an Instagram account. And then I started to grow the website and other social media channels. But it was truly based on passion for my community.
I think for me in my situation, I realized when I started Off the Record, I didn't know that it was something I had been using in my professional life, that it was a resource that I can use to help solve problems in my personal life. Off the Record is a card game, helps people transition from small talk to deep conversation, like I said, and all of the questions inside our signature deck are questions I've used with my clients and asking them and understanding like what is the why behind their brand, who are they as a founder, really getting deep into who they are as a person, because that's ultimately what fuels how they founded their brand. And I'm a creative director, so those types of conversations happen pretty often in our industry. Parallel to that, I was noticing that while I was walking away with incredibly strong professional relationships that were turning into deep friendships, I was experiencing like social anxiety in my personal relationships. And I didn't really realize until one of my clients told me, like, I have something that may help bridge like a loneliness gap. And I started doing research because the card market is very saturated. So I wanted to find a way to stand out. And the research was overwhelming. I mean, like less than 50% of conversations are meaningful exchanges, but a third of our speech is made up of small talk. So I wanted to figure out a way as to like, how do we essentially marry small talk and get from there to deep conversation? So it kind of was an accident and something I didn't really see. I was using these exact questions for over 5 years, and it really wasn't until somebody else kind of pointed out that like this is something that could be really helpful that then I started to explore further.
I love that. I feel like I have similar sort of experiences to everybody, but probably more so Way and Dante. You guys mentioned kind of creating a brand with community in focus, and that's kind of how Yo Soy Afro Latina came about. I actually created the Instagram page when I was going back, I would say probably 2016. I was going through this sort of self journey of trying to understand my identity as a Black Latina, and just like really pour into myself and educate myself on my history and all that. And I created this Instagram page just hoping to connect with other women and young girls like myself who are on this journey, and trying to find self-love within this journey as well. And I created this page. It only had like 30 followers as my friends at the time. After creating the page, I was like, okay, create some merch as well, just for fun. I felt like it was a creative outlet for me. Again, not thinking that I wanted to start a brand. I just was doing this because I was having fun. And I quickly saw that the page started to grow, and people were buying our merch. But I think what was a catalyst for me to really say like, okay, Bianca, like you have something good on your hands. Like let's turn this passion project into a brand, into a business. Like let's really expand it here. Was the pandemic, and I realized that even though Afro Latinidad was getting attention prior to the pandemic, it wasn't, to me, in my opinion, it wasn't an authentic representation of what we looked like, and our stories that came with us and our culture. So I decided to take it and run with it, and I started creating more merch. I started connecting with other Afro Latina influencers, and basically expanding our offerings outside of just creating merch to represent us and highlight our culture. I wanted to create opportunity for my community. So, like I said, I started collaborating with Afro Latina influencers and content creators. I started partnering with Black and Latinx brands that, we could find a fruitful sort of relationship that pours into both of our communities. So that's kind of how Yo Soy Afro Latina came about in a nutshell. But yeah, it really was, it didn't start with the thought of, oh, how do I create a brand? It was more so like, what do I feel is missing in the market or my community or whatever I'm looking at, and how do I fill that void? So really, it was just kind of like I was trying to solve for a problem that I felt there was no answer at the time.
Bianca, something that you just said about kind of figuring out, how you can differentiate yourself in the market or learn a little bit more about who your market was. It kind of reminds me of something that Kate mentioned about figuring out how to stand out in her market because it was a little oversaturated. So I'm wondering if any of you have the advice on kind of figuring out, once you have this brand in place or a product or service that you want to offer, how do you decide where to test it, who your audience is?
That's a really good question. From personal experience, because this was something that I had been using in my professional career, I had been testing it for unknowingly for years before that. But I think that in terms of figuring out who it is that you want to test, if you don't have that type of experience, I would say really diving into who your target audience is and understanding like what types of problems do they have, and then the immediate trying to find those people. Look in your circle. If there's somebody like a friend or family member, to start there. I mean, those are kind of like slightly biased people maybe to test things with, because they might be more prone to giving you positive feedback, even if they don't like certain features of your product or your brand or whatever. They may feel like they don't want to compromise a friendship or relationship with you. But starting there might be a good idea. And then, try bringing your product, if it's relevant, to like a professional event, or trying it with your colleagues, or if you have the opportunity to like put together a focus group, or the budget to put together a focus group, or influencer giftings, things like that. There's definitely opportunities to get really creative in terms of figuring out how you can gather people together to test a product. But it definitely doesn't have to be strangers if you can't or don't want to start out that way.
Yeah, I would say for me, my page is focused on music, and so it was kind of, and specifically R&B music. So it was kind of easier to figure out what the niche audience was for that. So I kind of went into it kind of understanding who I wanted the target demographic to be, but I'm also very into just experimenting with content and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and from there kind of determining, okay, I want to super hit this specific audience because I know they really love this sort of content. So for me, as like a media brand, that's kind of how I went into it, with figuring out who the audience was. And then from there, once you start to build a audience with your brand, you can look in the insights on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, whatever, and kind of truly understand, okay, these countries, these cities, this age range, this is my audience.
I think one key aspect of it as well is just asking your audience. There's this thing we do on Brooklyn Mavens, because we touch upon a lot of like things when it comes to Brooklyn. So maybe monthly, if I remember, but we'll ask them straight in the stories, like, what do you need to know? Like, we have this thing where anyone coming to Brooklyn, like, they can ask us, like, I'm new to the borough. Where should I go for this? What do I need for that? And another thing as well, if you don't ask, they will tell you in the comments. So I would pay attention to community management as well when you're posting.
Yeah, to echo that, I was going to say paying close attention to like social sentiment to understand what your audience is saying and like what they're looking for, and what sort of content they align with or what sort of content they're not really feeling. I think that's super important. And just like Marilyn said, just reaching out to your audience, whether this feels kind of dated now, but back in the day, I feel like a lot of people were leveraging IG story to have that sort of one-to-one connection with their followers or their audience, whoever it may be. So I think that's a great idea. And I know some of us are in different lanes, but for Yo Soy Afro Latina, we were heavy into the e-commerce lane these past few years. So for me, I relied heavily on our stats and just connecting with my accounting and trying to understand month over month, what did we sell out of? What sort of merch were people buying? What did people leave in the carts? You know what I mean? So just kind of relying super heavy on social sentiment and analytics, I think that is your best bet.
Yeah, I think what everyone said is super important, especially as it relates to social sentiment, and just building community. A lot of what I do is really just trying to facilitate conversations on social media. So not dominating the conversation, but basically giving my community prompts and topics to think about, consider, discuss among themselves. So, like, if you just even look through my account and look at the comment section, a lot of times I don't comment back to everyone or to most of the comments because I like them to be able to talk amongst themselves. Some people, of course, get into the sort of comment wars, if you will, but a lot of times it leads to really healthy discussion and different points of view. So I think that's super important. But also, as it relates to analytics, I think those back-end metrics are super important. So not just the likes or the comment, but looking at the shares. So a lot of times I'll go on Instagram, and if a post has 1,000 plus shares, I'm like, oh, what are people talking about whenever they share this post? So actually looking at those story shares of the original post, because a lot of people will add their own comments or sentiment, their own hot takes of the post, which leads to greater discussions. And in terms of sort of differentiation, which I think was the original question, I try to remind myself that it's okay to not post the same thing that every other like-minded account is posting. So there are other Asian American media accounts, and I'm like, I don't have to post the same thing as them. Maybe I do want to talk about affirmative action. I don't have to shy away from that. We can talk about the Asian perspective on, important topics like that. So a lot of the accounts that I follow or followed before starting my own, I was like, why aren't we talking about stuff like that? Why aren't we talking about politics? So although a lot of the posts that I create do lean entertainment and culture, I remind myself every day that it's important that I also don't shy away from the more difficult topics.
I love that you said that way because I do feel like one of the beauties of being able to build your own brand is like you get to kind of decide what are the opportunities for you to tap into certain conversations and when are the moments that you kind of need to be quiet. And it's funny because it's like even if you're doing it for yourself, it can be kind of a hard decision to make. But I do think like what you guys were saying, that's a great opportunity to kind of lean on your community to really either drive that conversation or give you some insight into what those conversations could look like. It does kind of make me transition into my next question, which is something a little bit Bianca, you kind of mentioned a little bit about selling merch, thinking about what your community wants, what you want to offer them. And it makes me think about the fact that so many creators are navigating towards kind of like full-time content creation or building a brand of their own because monetization is top of mind. Obviously, a lot of people want to make careers out of this so they can pay their bills, which get it. So I'm curious from you guys, what kind of monetizations opportunities should creators really consider when they're looking to earn income outside of merch?
I mean, I feel like the traditional approach is, become a TikTok influencer, become an Instagram influencer, and you get brand deals. And you can get paid for that, but I feel like it takes time. Unless you're like the 1% that happen to grow overnight, that can take a little bit, a few months, a few years even to build up enough of a following for brands to be like, hey, we'll pay you this amount of money. Something I've been enjoying more as like a LinkedIn creator is starting to do like talks and consulting where you can kind of almost control it a little bit more than waiting for a brand to reach out to you. And it's such an interesting way to be a creator and have your own personal brand, but then still make money because you are essentially an expert in what you're doing. Then you can go and work with one-on-one in consulting. You can work with other brands. And I mean, this extends beyond just personal branding that everyone on this panel can be an expert in something or are an expert in something, can talk about that or present it to someone and essentially charge for that, whether or not you're working a 9 to 5 or freelancing. It's something I do on the side of my 9 to 5 that's a really interesting way and has been a very beneficial way to make some extra money apart from, say, a brand deal on TikTok or a brand deal on LinkedIn, which is, unless you've got like 100,000 followers, is few and far between. That a lot of brands don't really understand that LinkedIn is becoming a creator platform, so they don't see the value in actually paying creators to be a traditional influencer. So that's just what I'm doing personally.
I can add some here. Once I started to get more followers on Instagram, I started to approach brands. not just for sponsored posts, but about capsule collections, for example. So one of them I just launched with the brand here in New York. It's they're called We Are Chimmy, and they sell accessories, fashion items, things like that. They're mainly focused on fashion retail. But I was like, hey, we have similar stories. We both started during the pandemic. We're both Asian founders. We're both in New York. So really just sort of pitching myself to them and, why we should do something together. And then, we ended up launching a capsule collection together. So there's obviously a revenue share there. There's co-branding. There's sort of co-marketing. And we're leveraging each other's communities. So I think just being proactive and looking at what sort of brands are out there that are like-minded that would be a natural and organic partnership is super important, because for me, one thing that I didn't want to do with my community is um, monetize too soon, but also over monetize, because you know me as a consumer, a viewer, a community member for things outside of my own, I understand that people get turned off by too many ads or too many sponsorships, and I wanted to keep things super, super organic and authentic. So that's why I was like, you know what? Instead of letting just brands approach me, I'm going to approach brands where I think there's a natural fit and partnership.
I love that you said that way, because I do feel like oftentimes when we're looking to monetize as creators, we get a little thirsty and we don't we like stop thinking about our brand proposition and like the value we can offer, and just start reaching out to a whole bunch of brands or just accepting all opportunities. And I love that you said that, because I do think that's like something that creators should really consider when they are thinking about collaborating with brands. It's like you don't want to, you know, take every brand partnership that comes to you, because some of them may not even be in alignment with what content you create or what your brand is about, which will only confuse your audience. So yeah, love that you said.
I agree with you, Jay. Like, you definitely want to be intentional about your brand partnerships, regardless if you have 100K followers or 10. Like, I think you should always be intentional with your brand partnerships. Another way to kind of monetize, whether it be your brand or yourself, because I think most of us probably could speak to this, but at least for myself, I have Yo Soy Afro Latina as my brand, my business, but Bianca Catherine is also a brand as well. So I've been able to use my likeness and monetize that as well. Of course, I try to keep it very intentional. I feel like when I first kind of got introduced to the content creation space, I wasn't as intentional as I am now with my brand partnerships. Not to say I just sold anything or was trying to push any product, but it's more so like I was just so eager to be in the space. And I feel like I had to adjust my mindset, and remind myself that, I am value, I am worthy, and I don't need to just take any partnership that comes across my inbox. Everything that is gold doesn't everything that glitter is not gold. You know what I mean? So just being mindful of what aligns with you and your community is really important. And also being mindful that, brand partnerships, I love them. I think they are a great way to, expand your reach and get creative and, just collaborate with people. I personally love them, but I I personally don't rely heavily on brand partnerships, because at the end of the day there is you're going in half and half with somebody else or with another business, right? So I highly recommend anybody, regardless if you have a brand or not, utilize and leverage the skills that you have to diversify your portfolio. And when I say that, let's say you're an influencer, you're a content creator right now on TikTok, right? go ahead, open up that or start that podcast that you've been wanting to do. You know, if you love talking to the camera, find out other ways to take those skills and leverage them to new opportunities to expand your portfolio, just in case brand partnerships run low, you know, one year. Because we've all seen it. There's ebbs and flows when it comes to the industry. So I feel like, you know, my experience has taught me to never put your eggs in one, all of your eggs in one basket, and to leverage the skills that you have to diversify your portfolio to maximize, you know, your opportunities and blessings.
Piggybacking off a little of what you said, Bianca, and also Rosie as well, we're seeing a rise in the creatorpreneur, so to say, where, you know, of course, creators are starting their own brands, but they're also, like Bianca said, diversifying their portfolio in other ways. For instance, I actually landed a C-suite role within an ad agency through TikTok. So being able to know when you have like personal brand equity in a particular subject matter, where a company can see the value of that as part of their sales pipeline. Like they can identify that you can bring in leads for their business, or you can be a huge marketing tool for their business. And of course, that then comes at a higher price because you're also being paid for personal brand equity access. And then the other thing is also, if you do have the opportunity, look into angel investing, or, you know, consider positioning yourself as an investor in other people's brands, or even investing, you know, like your knowledge or expertise in exchange for some sort of like equity within a company. There's definitely ways beyond brand partnerships and even beyond like digital products and UGC that you can really establish more credibility as not just a creator online, but like an entrepreneur who became so from the personal brand equity that you've built or the community that you've built online.
Love this. I love everything about where this conversation is going. It's literally making me hot with excitement. One of the things I wanted to go back to from Bianca and Kat, as well as Rosie, and Rosie, you probably be the best person to talk about this. Do you guys feel like you have to have a personal brand as a creator or an influencer in order to launch a brand?
I have such mixed views on this because I think creators who already have a personal brand and a community that trusts them, it makes it 10 times easier to build something that is going to last and at the end of the day earn money, purely because people have got that trust in them. So there's more people who are willing to be like, oh yeah, you're launching a course, awesome, I trust you. Oh, you launched a clothing partnership with a brand, awesome, let me buy that. Like a capsule collection, kind of like you were saying before, way like people already like this person even if they haven't met them. On the flip side though, I'm a big believer that it shouldn't matter what your follower size is to start launching something, whether it's your own company, a brand, whether it is trying to kick off your creator journey. I think if people are so focused on just a follower count, they're not really doing it the right way. But I think it's inevitable that having a following makes it easier, but it shouldn't be the biggest thing that is stopping you from starting, if that makes any sense to anyone else.
Yeah, I think there's also, I was actually having this exact conversation with a creator friend of mine who's very popular in the self-confidence and like dating space. And she was telling me that she feels like the business that she has started doesn't have enough mass appeal because it's so reliant on her personal brand. And from like a traditional brand perspective, I see where she's coming from. But at the same time, traditional brands work so hard to combat mass appeal and to have like a very niche community. So there's a lot of pros and cons in terms of starting a brand when you don't have personal brand equity yourself, or are not known as anything online yourself. But also your personal brand equity, if you are a very popular creator, well-known creator, or have some sort of community in general, it can be a huge point of leverage, especially if you plan to exit your company or if you want to start other businesses or things like that. So it kind of depends on your like own journey. But I don't think you have to be a creator by any means in order to start something like a business or launch any type of other venture.
I think just on the back of that, something I personally was dealing with like a year ago was this idea of if I was going to launch, say, a personal branding agency or consulting or freelance on the side, I didn't know what to brand it essentially. And as a personal brand creator, I think some people tie their entire identity, businesses, and everything to their name because that's what they become. So it could be Rosie Chong freelancing or something. And then you see the other side of the world. So there's someone called Sophie Miller who's big on LinkedIn, and she's got two kind of separate identities. One with Pretty Little Marketing, which is her company, and she does all of her events and her business through that. But her brand is known as Sophie Miller, and she's kind of got them separated and intertwined. And I think it's such an interesting journey to work out. If you leverage everything off your name, you get that freedom. If you, like you were saying, Kate, like leaving your job, but you can kind of go anywhere and everywhere, and people know, oh, I know Kate, I know Rosie, I know Dante, great, I know that person, whatever they do, I'll follow. And then you've got that separation, which can be almost a little bit liberating, a little bit healthy as well. And it's such an interesting debacle that I think a lot of creators who are entering into the entrepreneurial space or freelancing or kind of doing something else that's not just a 9 to 5 or not just being a creator kind of go through. And it's, what does the future look like if you put everything just in your one name? Sure, it's recognizable, but what if you want to shift and do something completely different? Are you limited because you're known as, say, Rosie Chong LinkedIn? What if I wanted to, I don't know, start a sporting label? People might think, oh, well, why would I do that when she has nothing to do with that kind of thing?
That's such a good point because, like, for instance, I know a creator who has branded a product with like literally her face on the product. And that can be, for instance, in the product world, that can be incredibly limiting because if you want to sell, for instance, in Target or Urban Outfitters, now you have to bring proof that like you can convert an audience into their retail stores, which people who do not brand their like product-based business or any type of like physical product solely around who they are as a creator or who they are known for, what they are known for online, it can provide a little bit of less limitations if you are trying to like scale that business. So I would say if you're considering starting a media company as a creator, it's a little bit different than starting a product-based business. I think if you're starting a product-based business, you have to really consider like, if I brand this product around me and my likeness, I'm kind of stuck with it. And I have to make sure that I'm okay with that. And there are success stories around that, like Susan Yara's Naturium skincare brand that just sold to e.l.f. a few months back. You know, there's a lot of success stories around influencers and creators starting product-based businesses that end up becoming incredibly successful in scale. But it is an important decision to make as a creator.
Kat, that's actually a good question. Well, a good response to something I want to lead into, because one of the things I've been noticing on my feed lately is like, as more people, kind of decide they want to become creators, I've noticed that a few people are doing kind of like what they call these faceless Instagram accounts or these faceless TikTok accounts. And on the topic of personal branding, it does make me wonder, like, does your face actually have to be a part of your content or be a part of your brand for it to be successful? I know some of you on the panel kind of prefer to be like behind the scenes. People may know that you run the brand, but may not necessarily know like what you look like. I want to know if that's like a conscious choice for some of you.
Yeah, I could definitely speak to that. When I started Yo Soy Afro Latina, I was very intentional that I didn't want to show my face, and I didn't want to, essentially, I didn't want to be the face of a brand. I wanted myself to be an extension of it, but I don't know. I personally didn't want it. I thought it was fun. It was mysterious. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like, let's just see how far we can go without people feeling the need to know who I am. And I think it kind of worked in my favor, to be honest, because like I said, when I started the page, the Instagram page at first, followed by our e-commerce website, it felt very community driven. Like you weren't sure who was behind this account, but you knew that it felt familiar. The tone of voice felt familiar. The content felt familiar. I wanted to feel like, if you were coming to the IG page, that you were just kicking it with your homegirls. You know, you're just kikiing and catching up. And, you know, I felt like I could do that without showing my face. Eventually, you know, when I had kind of opened the e-commerce page, and like I said, we started to grow and expand and have more merch, and then the pandemic came about. That's when I got more serious, and I was like, okay, you know, maybe I should show my face, maybe I should tell my story a bit more. And I think that definitely worked in my favor too, because, you know, for about 3 years, I had built this community, but people weren't really sure who was behind the community. And then when I kind of showed my face and shared my story, you know, I felt like a lot more people were intrigued. Not because I was just, you know, showing my face or whatever, but they were intrigued because they're like, oh my God, I can relate to your story. Or, oh my goodness, like my cousin who's Afro Latina is dealing with the same thing. You know, again, it was like this familiarity and sort of kinship that I was able to convey through our content and through the space that I created. And I recognize that there was some pros with that. You know, it's kind of fun being mysterious, especially in this day and age when everybody's so pressed to know what you're doing, you know? So I think there is a sort of healthy balance. I don't think you need to put your face out there to sell a brand or to create a brand. I think there's pros and cons. But I think keep in mind that it's not the face or the person that's going to sell the brand, it's the story behind it. So if there's a really strong why as to, you know, how this brand or this organization came about, that's what's going to resonate with people, not the pretty face, not the cool content, not the trendy sounds, you know. So just keep that in mind, that, you know, you could start a brand with or without your face being at the forefront.
I had
Yes.
a
Oh, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
I'll be quick. So for Brooklyn Mavens, we have a very unique story because we started building a brand by showing our face, and then we kind of rebranded to where we didn't want to show our face anymore. So it kind of is a pro and con, because till this day, people still say like we're the Brooklyn Mavens, but actually trying to rebrand and say like we're all Brooklyn Mavens has been a difficult ride. But I would say that I love the fact that people do kind of stop us on the street and they feel like connected, that they also see like another Brooklyn Maven. And also it's easier for us to get some like brand partnerships, because if there wasn't a face to it, then it would be kind of odd to be promoting something. And it's just easier to do that. So I would definitely say when you are creating a brand, kind of make that decision, because it does affect you in the long end.
And I was just going to add that I had a very similar approach as Bianca. I was very intentional about not putting my name and not attaching my name to Very Asian in the very beginning. Um, and in fact, actually, for the first 3 months, I didn't tell my partner, I didn't tell my family. My brother had actually texted our family group chat in the first 3 months, and he was like, "Hey, I just found this Asian account. It kind of sounds like your voice. Is this you?" And I was like, "Thank you for outing me on the family chat." Um, and still to this day, have no idea how he found the account. I guess it was just the algorithm. Um, but it was very intentional because, you know, I spoke about this before about dominating conversation. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't dominating conversation with my likeness. I wanted to make sure that, you know, the conversation wasn't about me or just my story. I wanted to build community for Asian Americans. So it wasn't until after a year that I actually introduced myself on the account. I had always spoken in first person, and I still do on the account. So people had sort of wondered who was behind it. So, you know, after maybe a year and a half, that's when I introduced myself. And you know, I don't really show my face that much on the account. And I kind of keep it that way for the sake of community. But I do, you know, take ownership of, you know, the pieces that I write, my POV, my perspective, just so that people do know that there is a real person behind the account.
Love that. I think it like gives creators and influencers like this opportunity to really decide when they want to have their personal brand a part of their, you know, we'll call it umbrella brands or larger brands or their product or not. And I think just being able to have that choice is really nice, because there are a lot of creators or influencers who like really prefer not to be in front of the camera. They prefer to build behind the scenes, do a lot of the creative work, you know, on the low or in a more discreet way, depending on what industry they're in. So I think having you guys' perspectives on that is really great, because it kind of shows the opportunities that creators and influencers can have when they are making those choices. I do want to take the next 10 minutes to open up questions to the audience. So if anyone has any insight that they want to share or a question that they want to ask, feel free to raise your hand and then you can hop on the mic. And if no one has any questions, I'll keep asking the panel questions. Oh, okay. All y'all came in at once. Great. Francis, hit us.
Hey, what's up? Thank you so much for putting this space together. My question is kind of simple in that I'm trying to figure out in developing my personal brand, do I need to focus on the colors and type, or should my overall tone be the focus in order to kind of galvanize my desired community or audience?
I mean, I'm always going to say it's going to come down to you as a person and your tone of voice and what message you're trying to convey and to who. I think I personally got bogged down about a year ago trying to pick a logo and pick branding colors and picking a style. And it just realized that for me, that wasn't making or breaking the difference between cultivating a really strong community. At the end of the day, people are going to follow someone because of what they have to share and what they have to say, not because they have a pretty picture or because of a pretty font. I think down the road, having a very identifiable brand, whether it's on a website, in a portfolio, on an Instagram account, having that cohesion is very beneficial of the kind of style that you edit in or the colors that you use in your LinkedIn banner or the fonts you use in your website. Having that is obviously important. Branding on a website is a little different to branding on like social media when it comes to, say, making videos or an Instagram story or something. But I think don't worry about that much at the start. I would focus more on what do you care about? What do you want to be known about? What do you have to say? And who are you actually helping? And focus more on that. And then the rest can kind of come after that. But maybe someone will disagree with me.
Piggybacking off that a little bit, and to help you with your brainstorming process, Francis, in terms of like content ideas or anything of that nature, ask yourself, what can I give an unprompted, like unscripted 40-minute TED Talk about? And it will just start the flow of like all of these things that you could just talk about forever and ever, and the things that you get really excited about. Share that. And a lot of the times it's things that you may think won't be interesting to other people. That's actually a green flag. It means that it probably is so normal to you, but it's not like normal to hear about for other people. And it may actually signify that there is a lot of potential for interest there. So that's probably where I would start to think about that. But yeah, colors and things like that, even though I get where you're coming from because you're an art director. So I get why you asked that, but probably not the most important thing in the immediate.
Thanks, y'all. I did want
Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you for your question. All right, I'm going to pass the mic over to Joy now, who was one of my panelists before.
Oh, hey, I'm no stranger to Creator Tea Talk. Jayde, thank you for this space. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My question's pretty quick. I'm a creator, hey, and I love being in this environment. I love creating with y'all. Recently, I think I've noticed an uptick in like really pessimistic or negative speak around how saturated our industry is. And for those of you who have recently started projects like from ground zero, for example, Dante with Yams, and have seen the expertise that you've had for years pour into something that you actually just started pretty recently, I'm wondering what you have to say to that idea of the market being saturated.
First of all, I need Joy to just narrate my life. She has like the perfect
Same.
voice.
Oh my God, I could fall asleep listening to your voice. Holy shit.
But yeah, the I feel like I've just working in social media, I've always just seen the negativity and like the uptick. I feel like it's just been like a consistent thing for years. But of course, it's still there and thriving. And I don't know, it's interesting. When I created Yams, I've intentionally wanted to create something very specific and niche so that, I could have my own POV and have, a product that isn't easily duplicated by anybody. So when I look at brands and just influencers, that's what I look for. I look for people with like very specific or intentional approaches to content or topics or themes with their content. So I don't even know if that answered your question, but that's kind of where I lean. Did that answer the question, Joy? I feel like
It does
maybe.
partially. I wonder if it affected like your motivation or execution at all in starting something from zero. Like if you were to give advice to someone who was interested in starting something that they hadn't yet, no matter the market being saturated, like what would you say?
Yeah, I feel like I think Kay was just saying this, but if you have that thing that you can talk about over and over, you can give a TED talk about it, no matter how many, if there's like 1,000 people doing it, but you can do it, a different way from those 1,000, I would say go for it. Um don't get put down by there already being 100 people doing your idea, because nobody's going to do your idea the way you would. So I kind of would give that advice.
I
Advice is
completely
on.
agree. I think like saturation is actually really inspiring because when I started off the record, like there's a ton of card games on the market, and yet we still have a loneliness epidemic. Why is that? And how can I, as a founder, create a product that solves that differently? How can I take what people are already used to and give a different spin on it? And the same thing can be done in terms of like media companies, or no matter what it is that you are, whether it's you and your unique perspective on something, or it's an actual product, or it's a SaaS company, like whatever it is. Saturation is inspiring because it means there's product market fit for whatever it is that you're doing as a creator, as a business person. So I think that I wouldn't necessarily see that as a negative thing, but rather as a really big positive. The bigger red flag is if you're doing something no one's ever done before. It's like, why haven't they done it? Like, is that a problem that doesn't actually need to be solved? Is that a perspective that doesn't actually need to be given? Maybe. So I don't necessarily see it as something negative.
Beautiful. Joy, do you feel like you got your question answered?
Yeah, I just wanted to stew in some goodness. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Joy.
Please narrate my entire life. Oh my God.
I know.
Need
You guys
that
gotta
voice.
follow Joy on all the channels. She is wonderful.
I'm gonna go follow y'all.
All right, and we have time for one more question. So I just brought Mimi up.
Hey everybody, hey Jade, and I definitely co-sign everything about Joy. I just attended her session this week, and yeah, she dropped all the gems, and we love creators who don't gatekeep out here, so love that and love this space. And sorry to be that person with 2 questions, but here I am, but it's gonna be quick, I promise. LOL. So my first one, so I recently quit corporate America, took my 401k, invested in my business, launched the podcast, eventually see it turning into a creative studio. But kind of to Katarina's point just now, I talk about death and dying, and a lot of people, I mean, there's content out there, but at the end of the day, like our world is so death phobic. But I've identified a niche and a gap that I want to fill because I'm a serial griever. I've lost 20 people in my life before I turned 25. And like there's so many other Gen Z, Zillennial, Millennials who kind of share this impact, who also share my identity. Shout out to Bianca, also Afro Latina. But to other people that share our identities. But my question there is to see, have y'all seen people who have podcasts kind of turn it into a creative studio? So that's number one. And the second one is really, how do y'all find harmony between like this capitalism and creatorpreneur lifestyle? I would really love to know because it's hard out here.
Real hard.
I feel like I don't know how relevant this is going to be to a US market, but here in Australia, there's a podcast called Shameless Media. Well, they're now called Shameless. They started as a podcast, a pop culture podcast about 4 years ago, and they've now turned it into like a proper media business. They rebranded to now be called Shameless Media. They run a few different podcasts, their own that they host, as well as a few that they have a recording studio in their office. So I think they've been a very good example, at least locally for me, that have shifted from just two girls chatting in a living room to actually having a proper business, a team of like 15 people. I don't know if it's a full creative studio per se, but they have been able to make that shift, and they run other people's podcasts, they produce, they do media partnerships. They're kind of evolving into that next stage. So they could be an interesting example to look up, but I probably can't speak from a more US local market personally, but it's definitely doable for sure to rebrand that and expand it.
Yeah, there's this podcast called Claim of Stories. Their number one career podcast. It's produced and hosted by Bima Williams. So they
Bima.
shoot all of their wait, what did you say?
I said I love me some Bima. Yeah, I totally like.
Yeah, so I knew like so one of their things was to do they go on tour and they do a live actual podcast, and I did their social, and that's pretty dope that they do that as opposed to like recording in the studio. But also it's also cool to see that Bemis also has its own personal brand, so I feel like that might be more in brand for you. But you already know them, so yeah.
Yeah, I know he has a show with Amazon now. He has like a video
Yeah, he
podcast, sort of.
does. Yeah.
He has his own shoe too now. So
I
I think
had
once
those
you really, ooh, I'm jealous. But yeah, once you define that community and really build that community, with your one idea, you can turn that one idea into 50 ideas. Also think about somebody like Issa Rae, who started with like, a YouTube series, and now she has like a record label and a production company and all these different things, coffee shops. So it's definitely possible.
Mimi, what was your second question?
Well, thank you all for those insights. Super grateful for that. The second question was like, how do you find? So, y'all, I'm not a fan of the work-life balance because honestly, I don't know. For me, that's like really hard because everything is not going to be 50-50, right? Like some days going to be 20, others going to be 80. So it's kind of like this harmony, right? Like, how do we find harmony? Or like, what's your advice on harmonizing capitalism, having to pay bills and cover expenses while also being like a creatorpreneur?
I'm going to take this one. Also, I'm going to give you a really cheesy answer that I tell everyone when I get similar questions to this. And it's always do the things that bring you joy. And I know that sounds so like fickle to people, but it's something that I really try to keep in mind anytime I'm working on something creatively. You guys know I have Creator Tea Talk, I have Weed for Black Women, I have my agency, and I have my personal brand on top of that. So one of the things when I think about like when I'm managing all of these different brands is that if I am going to take on a partnership, if I am going to take on a collaboration, is it something that I would actually enjoy doing? And if it's not, I fear I have to say no, even if it does mean missing out on money, which does suck sometimes. And the more I do that, the more I find that I'm able to keep myself in check and also keep myself mentally stable, which is very important as a creative, because if your brain is fucked up, that means you can't create. So really just establishing those boundaries with yourselves and focusing on the things that are really going to creatively inspire you and moving in that way instead of making decisions based on money or out of scarcity.
And just to quickly add to that, I would say from my perspective and my experience, I remind myself every day like community and authenticity above money and capitalism every day. Um, because it's so easy whenever you start to get tens of thousands of followers and brands are pitching you for sponsored posts, etc., to lose sight of what your original vision was. And just as a quick example, I'm not going to name the person, but I followed someone for financial advice. She became really popular on Instagram. She started to do a lot of ads, a lot of sponsored posts, and one of them was, she told her followers that natural diamonds are really good to invest in. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, and all of her followers called her out so much so that she deleted the post and she never addressed it. But it was an example of someone losing sight of their original vision of giving people like real financial advice in bite-sized, snackable forms of content. And she lost a ton of followers because of that. And she never addressed it, which to me shows that she's not as authentic as she led herself to be. So I would just say keep that in mind because people are smarter than we give them credit for, and they'll see through it.
Period. Thank you so
Period.
much. I'm really grateful.
For your questions, Mimi. All right, y'all. We are a little over time, so it's time to wrap up. But I wanted to thank everyone who joined for today's episode. I know for a lot of us, it's cold as fuck right now, just, unless you're Rosie, who's in Australia. But I do hope that y'all go sip some hot tea and keep warm as we head into the weekend. And I want to thank all the panelists, Bianca, Dante, Kate, Merlin, Rosie, Wave. Thank you all so much for joining. You guys were incredible. I knew you would be. And additionally, if you guys would like a replay of this episode, it's going to be available on the Creator Tea Talk website early next week. So that's creatorteatalk.com. And then for updates on Creator Tea Talk, you can subscribe to Loose Leaf, which is the official Creator Tea Talk newsletter. And you can also subscribe at creatortea.com. So again, thank you for joining, everyone. I hope you all have a rest of the week and stay blessed.